So the original announcement was obviously quite wide sweeping, applied globally. Some countries had already been picked out, such as Canada and Mexico. It looks like the way the calculation has happened, although we have not had formal confirmation yet, is to do with the deficit in trade between imports and exports between the countries. And that resulted in the Falklands coming off quite poorly. We are a sort of net exporter for the US. So that's what we were looking at. We have been working on more detailed analysis, but also talking to our industry as well as our shippers to get a much clearer understanding, and working with our economist in the team.
People will be familiar that we've got a single company who operate the Falklands Toothfish license. And their majority market for that is the US, although we're in close conversation to help understand the full data, the impact that this will have. It's been a very productive fishery, I'd say, in terms of the Falklands economy and the scale of the fisheries that we have and its contribution to that. It would have a potential impact on corporation tax if it was costing the company much more to enter the market, for example. But then that depends on whether that's a cost that's going to be passed on to consumers or one that would be absorbed by the companies. So there's a lot more to consider there than we have the data of right now. So that's why we've set people the task of trying to understand it further.
There is then, of course, the broader impact on the Falklands, which is our investments and our investment strategy. And what I would like to say to reassure people is that, we have a team of people working with us. We have financial advisors, and then we have HSBC, our bank, who's responsible for our investments. And they are literally working on this right now. As soon as this news started to, come out, they have been looking at exactly how our investments are made, where they are, what our investment strategy is, and looking to try and make sure that the Falklands savings are protected in the best possible way they can, so that we, continue not to be necessarily overly conservative, because different pots of our savings are used for different things. So, but what they're doing is very carefully looking at how that is working and making sure that we are in the strongest and safest position that we can be.
The most surprising thing from an Assembly's point of view, and I'm sure it's shared and echoed across most people of the Falklands, is that we were, I think, 8th placed on the worst offenders list, which was, was really, I suppose, quite jarring for us to be able to think that the US had this negative opinion upon the Falklands. And I have heard comments from some people saying, well, there wasn't much thought behind it at all. I mean, this is an executive order that came straight from the White House and named the Falkland Islands specifically. So we do need to be considerate and thoughtful as to how we shift the Falklands into a more positive light under the eyes of the administration.
Whatever happens, in terms of the bigger picture, in terms of trade between UK and the US, it's really important that the overseas territories are not left out of the conversation. We were deliberately left out of the conversation with regards to the EU, and there have been significant consequences because of that. We do not want to be in the same situation here. But also there is a matter of trying to get our US colleagues to understand our story, and that, we're not, unlike some other countries, the deficit is driven by different reasons. And so I think we've probably got quite a good story to tell and a good case to make. And so we're working on doing that quietly and calmly through the channels that we think will be the most effective for us.
I would say, with regard to the EU relationship, obviously we send a majority of our fishery products there, and that mostly being the calamari and the finfish. But it does certainly draw a magnifying glass over the importance of that relationship in getting those tariffs removed, the tariffs that were imposed as a result of the UK withdrawing us from the free trade agreement with the EU. We're very aware that the UK is going through reset talks with the EU, and we're also noting that the EU themselves have voiced a willingness to create stronger trade partnerships with the world's response to some of this global uncertainty. So there might be an opportunity, I'd say, for us to engage, and certainly, but that would need political will from the Assembly, as well as kind of strength and support from the business sector, to be able to push the case to get those 6 to 18% tariffs, which are currently paid on our product entering the EU, removed.
I think that is really a question for our industry and whether or not they would wish to do things differently. I mean, obviously, depending on how this all ultimately falls, they will have decisions to make. I'd rather not prejudge that at this point. I think it's safe to say that we'd like to try and fix the situation we've been faced with so that they don't necessarily have to make those decisions.